All right, so you wanted the scoop on the tech behind Eddie Buscana's BDE apparel. Well, buckle up because we're diving in deep today.
Sounds fun.
You probably already know Eddie from his blog, right? Always dropping these awesome insights about his work as an AI-first web and cloud solutions engineer.
Yeah, he's got a knack for breaking down complex stuff and making it actually interesting.
Totally. And this BDE apparel project, oh man, it's like the perfect example of how he matches up his technical skills with, well, a pretty bold sense of humor, you could say.
You think?
Yeah.
What is BDE anyway?
Haha, I was getting to that. Don't worry, we'll decode it all. But first things first, we're going to break down his tech stack, figure out the why behind all his
So
choices,
I'm all ears.
and then see how it all comes together to create that big dynamic energy he's always talking about. Ready to get technical?
Let's do it.
Okay, so before we get lost in the weeds, let's talk about BDE itself. What does it actually stand for?
BDE stands for Big Dynamic Energy. It's all about confidence, individuality, and not taking yourself too seriously.
Right, and that definitely comes through in his designs. They're bold, eye-catching, and kind of make you chuckle a little bit.
Definitely. His brand is strong. You can tell he put a lot of thought into it.
For sure. But since this is a deep dive, we're going to focus mainly on the tech side of things.
Sounds good.
So let's start unpacking this tech stack. Eddie's blog post mentioned WooCommerce, which I know is like a popular e-commerce platform. But was it the only option he considered? What made it the right fit for BDE apparel?
So WooCommerce is known for being super flexible, especially when you pair it with WordPress, which Eddie already uses for his blog and basically all his online stuff.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a natural choice.
Exactly. And that combo gave him a ton of control over the whole experience. He could customize the product pages, the checkout process, basically anything he wanted to make it really unique.
Gotcha. So it's not just about selling clothes, right? Eddie's trying to build a whole community around this BDE brand. How does WordPress help him with that?
Well, think of WordPress as the foundation for all his content and storytelling. He can seamlessly integrate blog posts, social media feeds, you name it, right into the e-commerce side of things.
Oh, that's cool. So it's not just a store, it's like an interactive experience.
Exactly. And that creates a sense of community, encourages people to engage with the brand, which is super important for something like BDE apparel that really relies on personality and shared values.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
So he's got the platform for selling and for storytelling, but what about the actual apparel? Like getting the clothes made and shipped? That's where Printful comes in, I'm guessing.
You got it. Printful was a game changer for him. It handles all the printing and fulfillment, which means Eddie doesn't have to worry about storing inventory or dealing with shipping logistics.
Smart. Frees up a ton of time and energy.
Right. He can just focus on the design marketing and building that BDE community.
Awesome. Sounds like he's really streamlined the whole back end. Now let's talk about those designs themselves, those bold graphics and visuals that really pop. He mentioned using Adobe Illustrator and Canva, which are two pretty different tools. Why the double dip?
It's all about using the right tool for the right job. Illustrator gives him that precision and power for creating those super intricate designs, like logos and detailed illustrations.
So the stuff that needs to look super sharp, no matter how big or small it is.
Yeah, exactly. And then Canva comes in for the stuff that needs to be quick and easy, like marketing materials, social media posts, that kind of thing.
Ah, so it's like a good balance between power and accessibility. Makes
Yeah.
sense. So he's got the platforms, he's got the design tools. But then he mentioned some domain drama in his post. He had to migrate his domain from Google Domains to Squarespace because of some policy changes Google was making. Why was that such a big deal?
Well, remember how we talked about WooCommerce and Printful being like totally woven into his website? Moving the domain wasn't just about changing his web address. It was about making sure all those connections stayed intact.
Ooh, I see. So it could have messed up the whole user experience if it went wrong.
Big time. Imagine people trying to buy a shirt and suddenly the checkout doesn't work, or their order never gets printed and shipped. It would have been a disaster for the whole BDE experience.
Yikes. Okay, so the stakes were pretty high.
Yeah, it was a pretty delicate operation.
Yeah.
Like imagine having to carefully untangle a spider web and then move it somewhere else without breaking any of the threads.
Whoa, okay, I get the picture.
Mhm.
So how did he pull it off? What were the most important steps?
First things first, backups, backups, backups. He had to back up his DNS settings, which are basically like the address book of the internet.
So if those got messed up during the move, it would have been game over.
Pretty much.
Mm.
Those DNS settings tell computers where to find his website and all the different services that are connected to it. WooCommerce Printful, the whole shebang.
Gotcha. So backups are like step one. What comes next?
Okay, so after the backups, he had to set up new DNS records with Squarespace and make sure they were all pointing to the right places. like the servers for his website, WooCommerce Printful, all that good stuff.
So it's like updating the addresses in that internet address book you were talking about.
Exactly. And this is what made sure that everything kept talking to each other behind the scenes, even though the domain was changing.
Okay, that makes sense. But even with all those precautions, wasn't there still a chance something could go wrong?
Oh, absolutely. Domain migrations can be tricky. There are a lot of moving parts. And even one tiny mistake can cause a domino effect.
So how did he make sure everything was working properly after the switch?
Testing, and more testing. He had to go through every single link, every button, every single integration, and make sure it was all still working as expected.
Wow, sounds like a pretty intense process.
It was. But Eddie's a meticulous guy. He knew how important it was to get it right.
In the end, it all paid off. The BDE website is running smoothly on Squarespace now.
Yep, no complaints from customers. And actually, Eddie ended up turning this whole domain drama into a new business opportunity.
Really? How so?
Well, he realized that a lot of people are going to have to deal with these kinds of domain migrations, especially with all the different platforms changing their policies all the time.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a headache most people would rather avoid.
Right. So he used his experience and all the knowledge he gained from this whole ordeal and created an AI-driven domain transfer service.
That's awesome. So he's not just a skilled developer. He's also a pretty savvy entrepreneur.
Oh, for sure. He sees a problem, he finds a solution. That's big dynamic energy in action right there.
You got that right. Okay, so we've talked about the tech stack, the domain drama. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the overall BDE experience.
Yeah.
What are the things that really bring the brand to life for the user, beyond just the nuts and bolts of the website?
Well, first of all, the copywriting on the website is fantastic. It's funny, it's engaging. It really captures that BDE vibe, that cheeky, confident tone.
Yeah, it's like the website's having a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Not just lecturing you about products.
Exactly. And then you've got the visual elements. Eddie's use of graphics, photography, typography, it's all so well considered.
Yeah, everything just looks so cool and put together.
And it all works together to create a cohesive look and feel. That's what branding is all about, right?
Right. It's like all the little details add up to create a bigger picture.
Exactly. And then on top of the visuals and the copy, you've got the user experience itself. Eddie clearly put a lot of thought into making the website easy to navigate.
Yeah, it's super smooth. You can tell he really cares about the customer journey.
Because at the end of the day, if the website is a pain to use, people aren't going to stick around, no matter how cool the brand is.
True. Okay, so we've got strong branding, a smooth user experience. And we can't forget about that sense of community that Eddie's built around BDE Apparel.
Right. He's not just selling clothes, he's selling a lifestyle, an attitude.
And people are buying into it. They want to be part of the BDE crew.
Which is awesome. It shows that he's really tapped into something special.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. We've been talking a lot about the specifics of Eddie's project. But what are some bigger takeaways that our listeners can apply to their own work? Whether they're building a website, launching a business, or just trying to get their ideas out there.
Good question. I think one of the biggest things to remember is that technology is a tool. It's not the end goal.
Right. It's about using tech to achieve your vision, not letting the tech dictate what you do.
Exactly. Eddie had a clear vision for BDE Apparel, and he used technology strategically to bring that vision to life. He didn't get bogged down in the technical weeds for no reason.
So it's all about finding the right tools for the job, not necessarily the newest or the fanciest tool.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of storytelling.
Ooh, that's a good one. Eddie's blog post wasn't just a technical manual. It was a story about his process, his challenges, his wins.
And that's what made it so compelling. People connect with stories.
Totally. So if you're trying to build a brand or get people excited about your work, think about how you can tell a story that resonates with them.
And don't be afraid to show your personality. Let people see the human side of your work.
Yeah, people want to connect with people, not robots.
Right. Authenticity is key. And speaking of connecting, don't forget about building community.
That's huge. Eddie's done an amazing job of creating a sense of belonging around BDE Apparel. It's like a tribe,
And that's something you can do no matter what kind of work you're doing. Find your people, build relationships, nurture those connections.
Makes a huge difference. So to recap for our listeners, find the right tools, tell your story, build a community.
And don't be afraid to experiment. Try new things. Figure out what works for you.
Yeah, it's all about learning and growing and constantly evolving.
And never giving up on your vision, even when things get tough.
Love that. Speaking of never giving up, Eddie was super transparent in his blog post about all the challenges he faced, like that whole domain migration saga.
And that's an important lesson in itself, right? Even the most experienced developers run into roadblocks. It's all about how you handle those obstacles.
Resilience, resourcefulness, that's what separates the pros from the amateurs.
Exactly. And Eddie definitely handled it like a pro. He solved the problem and then he turned it into an opportunity to help others.
Classic Eddie.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. The human element behind technology.
Ah, yes. That's something I'm super passionate about. We can geek out about code and algorithms all day long.
Guilty as charged.
But at the end of the day, technology is just a tool. It's a means to an end.
And the end should always be to serve human needs and desires, right?
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Eddie's work so inspiring. He understands that technology is at its best when it's used to connect with people, to tell stories, to create meaningful experiences.
Well said. I think that's the perfect note to end on. All right, so after spending all this time with Eddie's work and his process, what's the one thing you really hope our listeners take away from this deep dive? Like, what's the nugget of wisdom they can apply to their own projects?
That's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway here is that technology is a means to an end, right? It's not the end in itself.
Right, like it's a tool to help you achieve your vision.
Exactly. And Eddie's success with BDE Apparel really shows that he had a clear vision for the brand, and he knew how to use technology to bring that vision to life.
Like he didn't get lost in the technical stuff for no reason, you know?
Exactly. He used technology strategically to build the brand, to connect with his audience, to create a smooth experience for his customers.
So it's not about using the most complicated tech or chasing the latest trends.
Right. It's about finding the right tools for the job, the tools that will help you achieve your specific goals.
Makes sense. And speaking of tools, we can't forget about the power of storytelling.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. Eddie's blog post wasn't just the technical breakdown. It was a story about his journey, his challenges, his successes.
And that's what made it so engaging, right? People love stories.
Totally. So if you're building a website, launching a product, whatever it is, think about how you can tell a story that will resonate with your audience.
Like we always say, people buy from people.
Yeah.
They connect with stories,
Uh-huh.
not just features and specs.
Truth. And speaking of connecting, Eddie's approach to building a community around BDE apparel is something we can all learn from.
Yeah. It's not just about selling a product. It's about creating a shared experience, a sense of belonging.
Exactly. And that sense of community can be so powerful, especially in the online world where it's easy to feel isolated.
Totally.
Yeah.
So think about how you can foster those connections through your work, whether it's through social media, content creation, or even just responding to emails with a personal touch.
Little things can make a big difference.
You really can. And remember, it's a journey, not a race.
Yeah.
You don't have to have everything figured out from day one.
Oh, definitely. Embrace the learning process. Experiment. Try new things. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
That's how you grow.
Exactly. And always be open to new ideas and perspectives. The tech world is constantly changing, so stay curious, keep learning, and never stop exploring.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, I think we've officially unpacked everything there is to unpack about Eddie Boscana's BDE apparel.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. Big thanks to Eddie for sharing his insights and for reminding us that building a brand is about so much more than just code and algorithms.
It's about passion and personality and connecting with people on a human level.
Absolutely. And to you, dear listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked some ideas and given you a fresh perspective on how to use technology to bring your own vision to life.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep that big dynamic energy flowing.